With your paper horizontal, we're going to make some lines to divide this into 4 different sections. We're going to do something different in each section to practice our drawings. Then down the middle, this direction horizontally. Doesn't have to be perfectly exact in the middle. So on the top here, go ahead and write your name. Full name, please, first and last name. And then under that, put your teacher's name. So teacher. And then your room number would be R, whatever it is for a room number. The date. Alright, so once you have all that, we can just draw a line here to divide this up. And we're going to talk about value. And that is value as it is discussed in art. How dark or light a color is so I'm going to go ahead and underline value so you remember that's the actual term we're talking about. The next term is form. And form has to do with 3D objects. 3D, of course, being 3 dimensions, that means it is wide, tall, and deep. So how deep? When things look 3D, they look like they're coming at you, right? Or that you can reach through them, or whatever the case might be. So 3D objects. Alright, so we're going to do some value scales. And I'm going to write that down right here. Value scales. And I should have enough room to do 2 of them right here. So I'm going to draw a line all the way across like this. And then divide that in half. Like so. And we're going to do 2 kinds of value scales. I have room right here. I'm going to go ahead and make a little box here because I want to have room for my definitions. So the first value scale we're going to do, I'm doing a little arrow there just to point up at that, is a gradient. G-R-A-D-I-E-N-T. Gradient. G-R-A-D-I-E-N-T. Alright. So gradient is kind of, think of like smoke coming out of a chimney in some pictures or whatever, and it looks like it's going away, dissipating into the air. So I'm going to start by shading on the left side of the paper and then slowly letting go of the pressure. So shading is all about how hard you push down. So as I'm going to the right, I'm loosening up the pressure on the pencil. And as I'm going back to the left, the reason I go back and forth is because I want to make this nice and smooth, fill in any little pencil lines so that it all looks like one even gradient that's slowly disappearing into white. So whatever kind of pencil you're using, you can't do this with pen obviously. You need to make sure that you're going slowly and gradually getting lighter as you go. So that's all about pencil control here. That's how hard you push down. And also the reason I'm going back and forth is so I can see what I'm doing a little better. Now you want to leave this area right in here pretty much white, and this needs to be as dark as the pencil will go. So I'm going to go ahead and just bear down. Notice how I was holding it like this far away from me, that way I can't push down as hard. Now when I do want to push down as hard, I can get a little closer to the lead of the pencil. And just this little section right here I'm going to do as dark as I can get it. And so that means I have a lot of work to get this to be gradual all the way to white. So I'm going to fill in from here on a little darker, and I'm just going to keep building up layers and layers of graphite. Now I'm not sure if the pencil lead is called lead because it used to be made out of lead. Maybe it was. But pencils are pretty much made out of graphite nowadays. When you go into art school or whatever, if you ever do a lot of art, you'll end up with lots of other pencils like a charcoal pencil or Conti crayons, which is kind of like a colored pencil stuff, but it's almost got a hint of wax in it. I don't know. Anyways, so just keep working it back and forth. In the middle here, you want it to be about a 5. Let's say the darkest would be the 10, the lightest would be a 0, the white would be a 0 of the paper. So you want that to be a 5 right in here somewhere. If you could try to picture how dark or how light that might look. So that's why I'm going back and forth, and I'm keeping a good eye on it to make sure that I don't have a dark spot and then a light spot and then back to dark. You want it to be nice and gradual. Hence the gradient value scale name to it. Now some pencils you can't get very dark with them for some reason, and usually those are called hard pencils. I'm not sure exactly. Mine's somewhere in the middle, I think, because when you buy art pencils, they usually have something on them like I don't know if you can see that. It says HB on it. And some just have an H and they have different numbers on them. But just a regular old number 2 pencil will be just fine if that's all you got. With art pencils, you can try to switch them out and use a lighter or a harder pencil to draw with first, because it draws really light. I guess what happens is with the hard pencil, it's got like a different composition that's harder, and it's not as much lead comes off of it onto your paper. But even if you draw hard with them, I've noticed that you can't really get that dark with a harder pencil. Alright, so I got a little area here where I accidentally pushed down too hard. If that happens, the hard part is fixing it, because you can try to lightly erase it. But what's going to happen is that you're going to have a white area now that you have to fix. And how do you fix that? Well, you have to lightly... You almost are better off erasing parts of that all the way down and then kind of starting over. Now remember, when you are pushing down too hard, it makes it darker, and to go lighter I'm trying to stay away from the end of the pencil. And it also, you get a nice little flat spot on your pencil when you're shading. That's the best area to get lighter values because it's spreading out the weight of the pencil. So I'm going to go over here for now just to make sure that I'm not going too dark, and I'm going to really let go of that pencil and not push down hard to get this part blended back in over here that I erased. Super light over here. Going back and forth, making sure I don't have pencil lines. I just trying to make it as smooth looking as possible. Alright, so I'm just going to go back over here and make it a little darker in this area. Notice that I'm sometimes doing a circular motion, and sometimes I'm going just straight up and down. But I'm always just letting go of the pressure over here somewhere, because I don't want to go too dark. Now artists sometimes spend lots and lots of time doing the shading just to get it just perfect. I mean, it looks pretty good to me in my camera here, so I think I've got it. I could probably go a little bit more darker in this area, but I could spend an hour on it and not be happy with it. So it's just how picky some people are. Alright, so 2. The second one is going to be stepped. S-T-E-P-P-E-D. So for this last one, step just means we're going to show steps. Instead of trying to go from dark to light all in one place, we're going to try to make each square a different darkness. So try to draw lightly, especially over here on the right. So I'm going to make a line there. That's in the middle. And then in the middle again on each side. So now we got quarters or fourths. And then one more time. That's going to give us 8 sections. This one here is going to be your freebie. Now, since I numbered these 1 and 2, I'm going to put number 1 over here. So we know that's a gradient. And number 2 over here. So we know this is the stepped area. Alright. So the steps we're going to show is this one's going to be the darkest. So that's going to be probably the second easiest. This one's the easiest because you don't have to do anything on that one. Now normally you do 10 of these. We're only doing 8. So that should be just fine. Now I also do something similar on this one where I'm going back and forth, because you have to compare how dark or how light it is to the square next to it. Now you don't have to color the whole square, just make a nice big blotch. It does have to touch the line here where they're going to be next to each other, but you don't have to color in the whole square necessarily. That's the top and bottom part that I'm talking about. Now I'm trying to make this one as dark as I can get it with this pencil. I don't think my HB pencil can get as dark as some other pencils, or even like a number 2 pencil. But I'm pushing down pretty hard on this. There we go. Now I'm just going to lightly start these ones. Obviously I know this one's going to be pretty dark, so I'm going to go kind of dark, but I'm probably going to leave myself some room so I can come back and fix it if I have to. So that means I'm shooting for about a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10 darkness scale, 10 being the darkest. I'm trying to go about a 7 for now, just to make sure that when I shade these ones that they're going to look lighter, and that way I can push it to be darker later. Alright, so you should be able to tell that one's darker than the other. If you can't tell which square is darker and which one's lighter, then you're probably doing something wrong. Make sure I fill in all the little white areas that I don't want to show. I want this to be all one even value. Almost like if you had a paint that was a certain color and then you're putting it right in there. Now speaking of paint, different colors have different values. Like yellows and pinks and stuff like that have a lot lighter value usually than like a black paint or a purple, blue, or blue paint. Obviously a light blue would be lighter than most blue paint. Now these two I can't quite tell the difference, so what do? I can't make that one lighter unless I erase it, and that's why I'm going light, because I can always make this one darker. And it's a lot easier to add more pencil to it than having to erase a section and try to start over. Sometimes erasers don't quite erase how you want them to. So now I can tell that this one's darker than this one. And this is where it starts getting tricky. In these last three, you're going to have to get even lighter. So I'm almost like I'm afraid to break the pencil how light I'm trying to hold this. Alright, So that's lighter and even lighter still on this one. And it looks like I gave myself plenty of room to adjust these as I go. It's getting really hard to do these lighter ones. So even lighter here if I can. I'm like barely touching that paper, and it helps to have a nice smooth drawing area. I don't want to go too much on that one. I do want to make sure it's even though. So that's probably as light as I can go. So I'm looking at these two, they look very similar, so I'm going to darken this one up just a hair. So still using very, very light touch. There we go. Gotta fix that edge there. Ideally your edge would blend in to these lines, but it's okay if they don't. Now sometimes you can kind of squint your eyes. That means close them just a little bit and look through your eyelashes, and you can kind of see values for some reason. I don't know why that works, but it kind of does. Alright, so I'm going to keep working back and forth trying to figure out which square needs to be darker. So I want it to be light, darker, darker. So it looks like this one could go a little hair darker to make it sure it's different than the one on the right of it. And you kind of have to have good hand-eye coordination. I'm watching where you're putting these. Alright, so once I've darkened that one, then these two are looking very, very similar. So I can kind of tell that there's a difference here. This one's very light, this one's light but still a little darker, even darker. And then I'm going to darken these up. Like I said, I left that one at a 7 or maybe more of a 6, I'm not sure. Just to give yourself some room to come back in and change it. And you have to do that sometimes in drawing when you're trying to make certain things pop out and make them look right. Sometimes you have to kind of use your artistic interpretation. Not everybody's drawings of, say, a still life is like maybe a bowl of fruit or a bunch of random objects on a table. Those are usually called still lifes. Could be cups, plates, whatever. Anyways, everybody's drawings of a still life will look different, and they'll have a different approach of how they shaded them. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong, because everybody draws differently. Now I lost my line here, but you can still tell what side is darker. I'm going to try to define that line a little better here. There we go. And then blend that into that shape. Looks like I could probably go darker even. Now this one that I left a little lighter than I wanted to, I knew it was going to be lighter. Now, I don't know if you guys are having the problem. If you're getting a lot of graphite on the bottom of your hand right here, you can take a scrap piece of paper and put it on your paper like this. The only thing is, it's harder to see all these that you're drawing, but at least it keeps you from smudging your pencil marks. So a lot of artists do that too. They have paper that they do. Another thing that artists do, like say you're working on an easel, they have this soft, like a chamois covered soft ball on the end of a stick, and they put the stick somewhere on the easel or on the painting even sometimes, and then they rest their hand on the stick. So the stick would be like this, and then you would rest your hand on it and draw, and then your hand won't smudge anything on your paper. So just little tricks that people have come up with throughout the years trying to do artwork. So I'm trying to darken this one up so it looks a little more like a step up or down, I mean. So trying to go a little darker still than that. Just don't get too crazy, and then you'll have to start all over. Now, see how that darkened it way up? Now I'm going to have to fix this one. And that's the tedious part about shading, especially value scales. But since I darken it up, that's going to give me a little more room to make these two over here look a little different. So let me go back, make sure this is nice and even over here. Alright, so I'm just going a little tad darker with this one. Make sure it doesn't look the same. Now if I would have just went for it and tried to make it as dark as I thought it was supposed to be at first, then I wouldn't be able to go back and fix any of these. And yes, this takes some time to master. I don't expect you guys to have these done perfectly on the first go. Sometimes you will. Sometimes it comes naturally to some people. Don't be too hard on yourself if you don't quite get it right the first time. Now also, I mentioned smudging earlier, that your hand can smudge it. That's also another technique that people use, is smudging. I do not want to see any smudging on purpose on this lesson, because that does not help you learn control of your pencil. Now you can use it on your own artwork that you decide, hey, I want to try some smudging. You can. Great. But on my lesson, I want you to learn control with your pencil first. Learn the techniques first the right way, and then when you start doing art on your own, you can figure out how to use them the best way that suits you. Now I've got these weird lines right here that looks like a lighter. I think it's because my pencil needs to be sharpened. I don't want to sharpen it yet because I have so much lead showing on this big old jumbo pencil. Well, that's pretty close for now. I could probably work on these for another 20 minutes to try to tweak them perfectly. And if you're ever bored and you want to try to, get better at shading and drawing, especially for realistic drawing, if you ever want to do any realistic drawing, you can do these scales. You can use different colors. You could do a bunch of these and different colored colors, and see how dark you can go with the colored pencil and how light you can go. And that helps with making realistic drawings. Alright, so how do we use this shading in real life? Well, let's go ahead and draw a square right in the middle here. Don't make it too big. I'd say about 1.5 inches, probably no more than 2 inches a square. So that's a square, right? It has height and width, and that's a shape. Now we want 3D objects, which means we have to make this look like there's depth. So to draw the depth, we're going to draw diagonal lines in this direction. So it's almost like going to this point here. We could go to the point, but we're not doing one point perspective. We're doing diagonal lines. And I'm going to copy the same diagonal here. I'd rather you go up a little more than actually go down. A lot of people make a mistake and make it go straight across. Don't do that. Make sure it's going up, like it's pointing at something over there. Same thing on this side. We're going to diagonal line there. And then we're going to finish the back, because the back, this is going to be a cube all the way around, so they would be the same size everywhere. So I'm going to match this line here like so, and then match this line with this one. It's a little curved, but I'm just going to try to make it straight across. Now see how I have a little bit extra there? That's because I was trying to stay parallel to the front. No big deal, I can erase that. That's why you should always start your drawings lightly. And there we go. Now, yes, it looks 3D, but it's going to look even more 3D after we do some shading. So I'm going to start in the front and make probably about a 4 or 5, somewhere in the middle of shading. Actually, let's go a little more to the right, and about a 3. So we want it to be a light. Just depends where the light is. The light's actually going to be coming down from the left side. That way we can show some shading over here. So remember to start off lightly. Don't want to go full on to the value that you think you want to do. You want to work your way up to it. I know it takes a little extra time, but we're not robots. We can't just start drawing at the right value right out of our pencil. Now obviously if you're doing like markers or something, then you are stuck with whatever color comes out of your marker. But we're not doing that. We don't have 20 shades of gray markers with us right now. You probably could do that, but that's not what we're doing. We're learning how to control our pencil and making sure everything is nice and even. This is like the stepped one. You're just picking a value somewhere in here, and that's what I want in the front. Now when you get these little areas that you need to touch up, sometimes you have to kind of get your point of your pencil in there to fix them up. Just try to go really, really light so you don't ruin it and make a mark there. Alright, so I made a mark there because just to show you that if you point it, sometimes smaller areas are sharper and they make a darker mark. Alright, so this side here, we're going to go a hair darker than this. Maybe 2 hairs, whatever that means, right? So we were somewhere in here, about a 3. Let's go about a 5 or a 6. Once again, don't try to get a 5 or a 6 coming out of your pencil right away. We're still learning how to figure out where that 5 or 6 is and what it looks like. Now it helps sometimes to just go in the same direction for all your shading, because then otherwise you're gonna have to fix in the cross areas and try to get that little pointy method that I told you to try to fix it. But if you have a good hand-eye coordination, you should be able to get it. Now it looks about the same, so I'm going to darken this up. Start at the edge there so I make sure that there's a separation of values. And just darken that up already makes it look that much more 3D, because we see this in life all the time. The light and shadows are helping us see what the shape of things are. In this case, the form of the cube. So I'm just going to keep going back and forth, make sure I'm touching up any areas that look too light, make it look even. Sometimes the texture on the paper makes it hard to do that. If you have a paper that's more rough, it'll pick up your graphite a little differently. Alright, so I already can tell that it's more 3D. Now, there's one more thing that's going to even push your drawings to be better, and that's the shadow that's cast. So this one is just the shadow because it's blocking the light from over here. So let's say that's our LS. So LS is the light source coming from over here. This is blocking, so this is shadow. And then down here is going to be the cast shadow. So that's the shadow that is made by an object onto a surface of next to it because it's blocking the light. So in this case, I'm just going to go straight across this way. So I'm going to draw it in lightly. And now what happens sometimes with shadows is that they get lighter as they go out. So that's where we're going to use this kind of shading here. Now we want to go darker at first than this shading here right at the edge where it's touching the ground. So not quite, since we did this one about a 5 or a 6, you want to go about a 7, maybe 8. So I'm going to make that darker. Now obviously if you have a brighter light source, sometimes it makes a nice sharp shadow, sometimes it doesn't fade out like I'm doing today. So I'm going to make this area under here darker right at the edge. Got a little crazy and went out of there. It's okay. And it doesn't have to have a hard edge. What I was starting to say is that it's usually pretty soft because you have reflected light in the area sometimes. Here we go. See how it's getting a little lighter as it goes out? I'm going to keep going all the way to right about here somewhere. And how long your shadow is going to also depend on where the light source is. So yes, this takes some time. Now if you got a little fuzzy looking down here, and you're using of course a good pencil that you can erase, you can always go back in and erase this down here just to give it a little sharper look. And I'm going to erase that line there that I made too long. And now I just want to touch up a few things, and this cube is pretty much done. We're going to be doing these two squares next. Alright, so that should look fairly realistic right about now. I could go back in and touch up stuff. These lines, they're kind of dark. Obviously we'd need more information, like it could be up against a wall back here if it's a cube. It could be a building, so there could be other buildings, and your shading would look differently because usually on buildings there's stuff there and there's darker like tar paper kind of stuff on the top. So yeah, you could go in and make sure that your lines don't look like lines and try to shade them in so that they blend in with the shading, and that will help make things look realistic. And like I said, sometimes you have to use your artistic interpretation when you look at an object. Sometimes there's a white edge against a white background and it kind of almost looks like it's disappearing, and then you can shade that edge just a little bit to make it pop out for your audience or your viewer. Okay, so here we go.